you have kids, at some point it's probably crossed your mind that, hey, I don't really like their spouse, or I don't like the person that they're dating, or I'm concerned that their marriage is not going to work out. And so now you're wondering, hey, I want to leave my kid this money, or I want to leave my kid this house, and eventually go to my grandkids. But what happens if they get divorced? I don't want the spouse to take all of the money or to take half of it. So what can you do? And again, this is probably one of the most common things when people start thinking about estate planning. Either they know that to be the fact, because a lot of times they'll say, hey, listen, we just don't like, my daughter-in-law, my son-in-law, or we don't trust the person that, my kid is dating, and we're concerned about that. Or when we bring it up, they're like, oh yeah, that's a major concern. So this is a big thing a lot of people are worried about. And so if you're in that situation, what you want to do is when you start putting together your plan, you might, a lot of times people just say, hey, I want my kid just to get the money outright, right? So a lot of times when we're doing a plan, we might say, hey, the kid is going to get the money at 25, at 30, at 35, or at 21, 25, 30, whatever the case may be, or part of it when they graduate from college, or something along those lines. And that might be okay, right? But if you're concerned about what's going to happen to them, if they're going to get divorced or something like that, you maybe don't want to just give the money outright to them. And again, this is a kind of a unique, there's a lot of legal battles over this. One thing that you can do, or that your kid can do, is maybe they get a prenuptial agreement before they get married. Again, difficult. Some people are just against it. Some people, for whatever reason, don't want to do it. If you're leaving someone money, maybe you force them and say, hey, listen, I'm going to leave you this money, but I want to make sure you guys get a prenuptial agreement if you're comfortable doing that. But a lot of people aren't. Some people maybe after a couple years in the marriage decide, hey, we need to get what's called a postnuptial agreement, and they'll do that. Again, that's great. But apart from that, it's tough, and each state is different as to what rights a spouse has, what's called community property, or what's what's a marital asset, what did you have before the marriage, and things like that. Inheritance is no different. It can be a tricky thing. One of the things that we see and we'll typically recommend is maybe we're going to put this money into a trust for the child, and that way it doesn't really become what we could say commingled, right? So a married couple has a joint bank account, rather than you just leaving them $500,000 and that $500,000 go into their checking account. Now that money is very clearly commingled. It's both of the spouses, where if they were to get divorced, the spouses are probably, that's going to come into the divorce, where maybe that now gets split 50-50. Maybe we want to set up some sort of trust where that money goes into trust for your beneficiary, for your heir. And then there could be the argument that money can only, if it stays in the trust, whatever stays in the trust, if there's a divorce, arguably it shouldn't be part of the divorce, because that money was never commingled. It didn't have anything to do with the marriage. The partners were not contributing equally or contributing to those assets. So hopefully that could remain separate. Now, whatever was withdrawn, if there's $500,000 and your kid goes and withdraws, $100,000, that $100,000 very well, more than likely would be part of the divorce. But the $400,000 that's still in that trust, arguably is not going to be a part of that. So again, some things to consider. A lot of people, when they say, hey, I just need to do a very simple will, a simple plan, this is really easy. But when you start thinking about these things, it becomes a little bit more complex, especially if you are in the situation where you don't trust the spouse, or you're concerned about maybe your kid's choice in partners. This might be, setting up some sort of divorce protection trust for your beneficiaries might be something that you want to consider.